Namaste and welcome to Epicenter. My name is Thapa. We just had the first anniversary of the current government. That is an important milestone as Nepal looks forward to an era of stability and prosperity. At the time of recording this special edition of Epicenter, two-day investment summit is underway here in Hotel Solti. A lot of investment commitments have been made. But the outcome of 2017 Investment Summit shows translating those investment commitments into actual flow of investment is an uphill battle. Not just foreigners, many Nepali are also skeptical regarding the investment climate in Nepal. Is Nepal ready for more investment? What opportunities do investors see here in Nepal? To answer this and other questions, I am joined by three vice presidents of the World Bank Group who are here to join the two-day-long investment summit. We have Keiko Honda, Executive Vice President and CEO of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, part of the World Bank Group. Welcome to Epicenter.
Thank you.
And we have Schafer, World Bank Vice President for South Asia. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Hans-Peter Lankes, Vice President for Economic and Private Sector Development, International Finance Corporation, IFC. I welcome all of you. Welcome to Epicenter.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So far, how's Nepal treating you?
It's fantastic to be here.
So I'd like to begin with Hart. Let us start by learning a bit more about what different part of the World Bank Group do. I mean, what role your organization play in the development of any nation, let's say about Nepal, like how do you work with the government? Let's start by that.
Well, Sama, you know, the World Bank is actually made up of three major arms. One is the World Bank, IBRD, IDA. Then you have Keiko here for MIGA and Hans-Peter, who is representing IFC. I'm representing the IBRD, IDA part, which really deals with governments, with the public sector. And what we do is we are known for providing project finance, for providing credits, loans, and so on. But the World Bank is much more than just providing money and resources. We also provide technical assistance. We bring our global knowledge, because we are working around the globe. We bring our global knowledge to countries like Nepal with our analytics, with our technical assistance. We help build institutions and capacity, and we are doing policy advice. So we have a very strong relationship with the government of Nepal.
Okay. So Keiko, can you just highlight your current portfolio and what are your plans for investment?
Well, MIGA is, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency is too long, so we call us MIGA. MIGA was set up about 30 years ago to create development impact by bringing foreign direct investment. At this moment, we are covering over $23 billion of FDI into multiple different countries. And we actually about to bring in sizable investment with a Korean investor into this country right now.
Hans-Peter, I'd like to know from you, can you just give us a brief insight about your portfolio and the work you've been doing in Nepal?
Yeah, happy to. So the IFC is the private sector oriented arm of the World Bank Group. IFC supports private investors around the globe, and it does so with a whole range of instruments. We can finance equity, we can finance debt, we can provide guarantees, all of those. That is one instrument. And the second is that we provide advice. And that's a little bit like what Hart was saying about the World Bank in the public sector. IFC provides advice in the private sector about how to structure a PPP, about how to lend without collateral to farmers, a whole range of different advisory, and those are the two main products. And in Nepal, IFC has worked for many decades now. It has a portfolio, it has cumulatively invested about $160 million in Nepal, and in a broad range of sectors. Going forward, the intention is to step that up very considerably.
So you've all arrived especially here for Investment Summit. I'd like to ask Hart, how is this visit important to you? What does this summit mean to you?
This summit is really the first milestone on a journey that investors, the government, development partners are ready to take together to bring more investment into Nepal, to create jobs in Nepal for Nepalis.
So Keiko, do you like to add some point? How this summit is important to you and your organization?
Government budget has to fulfill competing different needs. So therefore, it is key how the government can leverage private investors' money. Having said that, that's not really easy. But I think Nepal is at that stage, have a capability as well as the willingness to bring private investors into the Nepal, including foreign or close-border private investors. So therefore, I see this investment summit is very timely.
So Hans-Peter, your remarks on the ongoing investment summit.
Yeah, I want to join Keiko. It's an important opportunity for the government to send a signal, to showcase what it is doing about private investment, to demonstrate that it is serious about attracting private investment, and then also to be visibly accountable for those policies. And we all expect such a summit to have a follow-up, and investors to take a very close interest, given the visibility that it has received.
Okay. So we've been talking a lot about investment since a long time, you know. The summit aims to showcase Nepal as a fertile investment destination, we all believe. What are the main bottlenecks in creating investment-friendly environment in Nepal? Hart, your take on this?
Well, I think actually the government has identified some of those bottlenecks, and over the last year they have put policies in place to remove them, to make it easier to register businesses, to make it easier to bring in investment from outside the country, to simplify the rules that govern business regulation, land access to land, and so on. So these are policies that are in place, and now we have the investors here, and the government is showcasing what they have done. But the journey will continue with making sure that these policies are being operationalized and actually make sure that the money comes here to create more private businesses and more jobs from the private sector.
Keiko, you just mentioned like Nepal Investment Summit is a positive step taken by the government of Nepal. But do you think this was the correct time to hold this summit? Is Nepal ready for more investment? What do you think?
Well, I actually do think so. I think people in Nepal want to have more power, more road, more educations, better healthcare. So therefore, why not? You know, I really don't think Nepalese people really need to wait another 20, 30 years to get there. In addition, this summit, I'm very surprised. A lot of people, actually more than expected, people showed up. Therefore, room is really packed. So this is a great indication.
Is Nepal ready for more investment? Your take on this?
Nepal is ready for a lot more investment. Nepal has received very little in the past. It is making a very major push in this regard, and that is what we see here at the summit. One thing that's special about this situation is that we have a government with a strong majority and the prospect of stability going forward. And it's important for investors to have stability. Investors need to be able to plan. And a government that can also follow through on its commitments is a government that makes it easier for investors to follow through on their plans.
Nepal held an investment summit 2 years ago. I think not much has happened since. Why would this summit be different than the summit we held in 2017?
Today's Nepal is different from the Nepal 5 years ago, 2 years ago. If you look at Nepal over the last 3 years, the economy has been growing at between 6 to 7%. That's enormous. That is as good as the neighbors of Nepal have been doing. Poverty has come down tremendously. And Nepal has recovered from an earthquake, from a tragic earthquake. That shows the resilience of the Nepali people. And now with this new government, we have moved to a federal system, which means the people are actually empowered to determine the direction of where their economy is going. And policies have been put in place. So this is really a totally different situation than 2 years ago. And everything points in the right direction to bring in more investment and make sure that this investment summit is going to be followed up with very specific action to make sure that deals are being actually implemented.
Keiko, do you have a different view, or you just want to add
No,
some point?
Definitely join Hart. I think people in Nepal has a high aspiration. I even like to ask you. So are you not really deserving better infrastructure, better environment, and a more interesting job opportunities? I think our answer is yes. And then why not? You know, you have to wait for another 20 years.
Hans-Peter, like a lot of investment commitments are made in an event like this, you know. There's a lot of, I think, a sense of competition going around among investors as well. But like the actual flow of investment does not come as committed. Why this happened? Like we can take example of 2017 investment summit as well. The flow of investment, the actual flow of investment is very less as committed.
Well, you know, there's a long way between having an interest and sketching it out, including with partners, and then being able to implement it. With investments, you have to go through the planning, you have to go through many steps with the authorities very often, especially if you're in infrastructure. And those things take time, and they surface issues that maybe are not so visible at the beginning. So investment is a process.
So aren't these points taken in consideration while committing investments?
Committing investment is a legal act. So when you say this, you don't actually mean the legal act of committing the investment. What you refer to is the intentions, and an investment summit is an opportunity to solidify intentions, but not to sign investments, not to sign the financing of investments. That comes after a lot of work that needs to be done. We call that due diligence on the investment opportunities. Things have to come into place.
Do you feel there is a sense of competition, as I mentioned, among the investors?
I haven't felt that sense of competition here. You will see there are...
Or the lack of homework?
Yeah, well, there are very interesting investment opportunities in Nepal in principle. Investors in the past have been hesitating to go into those. We all know that there's huge potential in hydropower, for instance, and the private sector will have to play a big role in that. We will see as the first of these investments take place and everybody can watch and see that it works, you will begin to see a more sort of a cumulative interest, and that is when there will be competition. Another area is tourism, which everybody understands is a big potential in Nepal. If investors have a track record or see that investments function, there will be a whole lot of interest in that sector.
Hart, as it said, every opportunity is followed by a lot of challenges, you know. What are the challenges a country has to face if it's asking for huge investors to join the nation's economy?
To add to what Hans-Peter is saying, you asked about competition between investors. I think one thing is there's a competition between countries to attract those investors. And this is something where political stability is an absolute prerequisite. Investors are looking that their investments are safe and they can go into a country. Second is, what is the ease of doing business? How easy is it to set up a company, repatriate profits, bring in investment, bring in workers, get visa permits, and all these things are a long range of regulations and policies. What we have here in Nepal is political stability. We also have a number of very significant policy reforms that have gone through cabinet. The PPP law, the Investment and Financial Transactions Act, and these are important. Now the next step is make sure that they're actually operationalized and implemented, and this is where the World Bank is actually helping, providing support to the government. And those are things that investors are looking for.
Government of Nepal has amended several laws, rules, etc., especially for this summit.
Yes.
Like, are you happy with the preparation taken by the government of Nepal?
Well, certainly what the government of Nepal has done in its first year in office is a tremendous achievement. And this is a game changer when it comes to attracting foreign investors. Nepal has also done more. They have actually gone on a roadshow, and we have been supporting them to take the story to other countries within the region so that investors there learn more about it. And again, this investment summit is not a one-off event. It is the first milestone in a journey. And we have to continue now to follow up to the summit, then make sure that the laws are implemented, regulations are put in place. And all these are things that we from the World Bank and from the World Bank Group are committed to support Nepal.
I believe, asking for investment is not a big deal. Like committing an investment is not also a big deal. Like retaining those investors is a big deal. I mean, today at this phase, what are we lacking? The real flow of investment or the investment climate? What do you see?
Well, as Hart has said, there has been a lot of work on the investment climate. Recently, policies have been put into place. In the past, the investment climate has not always been very good. And in fact, for foreign investors, there have been a lot of restrictions. And this is, the signals now are that this is changing, and investors will be watching that very closely. How does the change happen in practice in their sectors for what they are coming to Nepal for? So we are at that point where change is coming, and it will have to be tested. Now, you said commitment is easy and retention is the difficult part. Commitment, like putting money, and in some cases really quite a lot of money into Nepal, is not an easy act for investors. They will have to be sure, they will have to be convinced that this works. That
comparatively easy than translating those commitments into action, I meant.
Yes, well, so investments, of course, differ in different sectors. We all watch very much this infrastructure space. It's also very important to look at other sectors like agribusiness or services, education, healthcare. Those are all sectors where we've taken a very close look. IFC and the World Bank together over the past few months, we've done a diagnostic of these sectors and have found a lot of opportunity and also things that need to be done in order to unblock these opportunities. And those are sectors which reach a lot of people, and I think should also be in the spotlight.
Keiko, I'd like to know from you, like we all know an event like this, a summit like this can really add a spark. Besides this, what should the government do to attract enough financing, having said that we have a stable government here?
Okay.
The other factor that our government should take into consideration.
Right. Well, first of all, I just like to congratulate the people in Nepal to attracting this many people. I think over 500 people are coming all the way to Kathmandu to spend 2 days here. Nepal is not the only country want to attract the foreign direct investment, and Nepal is not the only country having an investment summit. And having said that, overwhelming attendance coming all the way to the country to participate 2 days is actually, quite remarkable. Having said that, as you pointed out, there are many things to be done. First of all, as Hart pointed out, we have to continue working together to improve the investment climate. And second of all, it would be really helpful government to identify some of the opportunities to bring private investors in. For example, IFC, Hans Peter's organizations, and MEGA are working together in hydropower project, which is very sizable. And the government decided to invite private investors to this very interesting opportunity. I think that kind of thing would be extremely helpful. And also government for this case come up with the very specific plan to attract multiple bidders, multiple investors into this project. By creating this kind of competitions, government can get very good terms or deals. And on top of it, for this particular case, government allows IFC and MEGA to bring our environmental social performance standards. So therefore we can make sure that people in Nepal get benefit out of it. So all those things is also requires a lot of efforts, both governments and the people in Nepal, as well as the private investors, also including us. But I am very confident this will set a very good precedent.
Do you have any critical observation as well?
Well, of course, there is a room for improvements. I do have a room for improvements, but I think, if we fear any potential room for improvement is coming out of any efforts, and if we don't really do anything, we have to live as it is. But if we kind of allow ourselves, not a perfect, however, making a progress, that gives always potential or better future for us and for our children.
Hans-Peter, I have been sensing, I was going through newspaper, online and all for this interview, I've been sensing some sort of fear when it comes to welcoming big investor in the country by our local entrepreneur or investor. There's a sense of feeling of being lost, They argue you cannot call investor everywhere. You have to prioritize the sector. Your take on this view?
Well, first, I don't think there should be fear. Of course, investors who today are in a particular market will sort of instinctively want to protect their market, but that's wrong. The real benefits and the sizable investments you get when there is a level playing field, when there is openness to investment. Countries that have been successful, look at Malaysia, is a country that has been very conscious about bringing in investors from outside because they can bring the technology, they can help the local private sectors to learn and to scale up itself. In Malaysia today, you have Malaysian companies that are very successful, and you have foreign companies. The fact that a market opens up does not mean that local players get wiped out. So there should not be that fear. In fact, it's very important to be open to investments from abroad. If markets stay closed, the population will not benefit in the end. And I will give you let's be clear about the challenge that Nepal is facing. Nepal has ambitious targets to reach middle-income status by 2030. It will have to grow by 7 or 8% a year to make it, which is perfectly feasible. You look at the neighbors, China and India, they have been growing very fast. But in order to grow at that level, you have to invest a lot. And in our estimates, you probably have to invest 3 to 4 times more than is the case today. You may have to invest $6 to $10 billion a year. That is a big step up from where we are. And that can only be brought in by deep-pocketed investors. So Nepal has to bring in investors from abroad, and it has to bring in investors from inside. Both have to play a role, but there ought not to be sort of a defensive attitude, because we're not going to get there otherwise.
So in the meantime, isn't this also necessary to make them secure, to quench their insecurities? What should be done if they are really insecure regarding the big investor coming to the country? How can IFC help to crowd in private sector investment, maybe?
Yeah, well, IFC is investing about 80% of its funds with local private sectors, only about 20 or so % with foreign investors globally. And that used to be different. If you go back 30, 40 years, it was primarily focused on foreign investments. But more recently, local private sectors have become strong enough for IFC to work with them. And the same is true in Nepal. So IFC is absolutely committed to work with the Nepali private sector to make it, to enable it to compete, to get it, to enable it to acquire the skills and the technologies and the funding that they need to compete in an open market.
Hart, the World Bank Group is seen to be involved in infrastructure project mainly. What are the people of a country, how does it help to build human resources, what about investment in other social sector? What about investment in industry based investment?
Well, I think we have to look at the World Bank portfolio right now here in Nepal is about $3 billion US dollars. It's 25 projects, and they range from infrastructure to agriculture to education, nutrition, health services, safety nets, and so on. So it's a whole range, public finance management. I think this is one of the advantages of the World Bank, because we are such a global institution, and our resources that are available for Nepal allow us to engage in a number of sectors. And so infrastructure, of course, is important, but equally is the investment in human capital. And we have come up recently with a human capital index, which measures the potential that a child born today will realize of its full potential when they enter working age. So a child born today in Nepal, to give you an example, will only reach 49% of its full potential if it had a full education, perfect health care, perfect nutrition. And this is something where we now need to look at education quality, quality of health care, making sure that nutrition is adequate, particularly in the early childhood stages, because stunting is a major problem in Nepal. So we are working on the whole range of development issues.
Okay, so development has like social and environmental challenge as well.
Absolutely.
Like how do you address these issues? I mean, is this a big challenge for
Well,
Bank?
this is actually a very interesting topic, and I used to work on it before I worked on South Asia. As a World Bank group, we are holding ourselves to the highest standards in terms of protecting the environment and protecting the people. So every one of our projects, when those are prepared and appraised, has to be following very strict, has to meet very strict standards with regard to sustainability, with regard to environmental sustainability and social sustainability, making sure that everybody has equal, there's equality in terms of benefiting from those projects. Nobody is harmed, that the environment is sustained. So these are some things where I think the World Bank stands out in terms of how we prepare our project.
My next question is for Keiko. As we are talking about investment and investment, I think like profit is the main element of investment. Like, what discourages investor for investing in a country? Like, your short view at this. I mean, what can be done about it, and how your organization MEGA helps to discourage, like, investor for investing in a country?
Okay. Well, first of all, private investors have to be responsible for business outcome. Therefore, we do not extend the support for the business outcome. Having said that, non-commercial aspect of the investment we sometimes support. Namely, for example, currency incompatibility, which essentially means the private investors earn the money in locally, however, in case they cannot convert to their home country or hard currencies, we come in to support. Or expropriation, or potential breach of contract by the government, or warrant civil disturbance. Those non-commercial side of the potential risk that we are covering. So therefore, we'll make sure that private investors can only take the commercial side of the risk.
Nepal Investment Summit might have ended today, but the work is far from over, What do you think are important next steps for Nepal, following the summit? After the summit is over, what are the things to be taken in consideration?
Well, Sama, it's as we said in principle, it's important to follow up. It's useful to have a summit. It highlights achievements, it highlights reforms, it brings investors much closer to potential opportunity, but then there has to be follow-up. Things have to happen on the part of the government and on the part of the investors, of course. So the most important thing after a summit is to make sure that we have a process for following up and holding ourselves accountable to that. And this is something that we, on our part, in our country strategy, for Nepal are going to do. So IFC has a very considerable ambition in Nepal to increase its lending and investment in Nepal over the coming 4 years, way above the levels that we have had in the past. And that's our commitment, and we are going to measure ourselves against that. But for that to happen, also the government needs to make sure that those policy changes, those reforms that it is announcing here, then become reality on the ground, that the agencies that deal with investors are fully aligned with these policies, that the sectors that are meant to be open are actually open for investors, and all of those issues that we have been talking about.
So in Nepal, if we talk about investment, there is a lot of comparison going around every moment, like it's a comparison between China, India, or the United States. Like, do you think, my question just goes to, I think, Keiko, AIB will be a complement or a competitor to the objective of the World Bank in context of Asia and especially the developing nation?
For Nepal, Nepal has a high aspiration, high potential. I think it's better Nepal to have multiple options of financing. That's also true for domestic investors versus the foreign investors, but also for developmental financial institutions like us. I think it's better to have multiple options. So therefore, that's also be a good motivation for all of us to bring the very best solutions to fit with Nepal's situation.
Hart, your remark on the emergence of AIB, will it be a complement or will it act as a sense of complement or a competitor to the objective of World Bank?
No, definitely a complement. I mean, the financing needs are enormous, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. So the more resources available, the better. And fact is that the World Bank and the AIB, we're working together in a number of countries on a number of projects, and it's a very strong and a very successful partnership.
My question goes to Hans. There has been influx of foreign investors in Nepal lately. How do we capitalize on these opportunities? Because the core problem is translating the opportunities into, the actual result. There's a huge gap. We have an opportunity. We've been hearing this for a long time, but like translating those opportunity into action is really a big ask. How can we maximize the opportunity?
Well, the opportunity is there. It's good that the investors come, that they see those opportunities. We are talking to several investors ourselves, IFC, MIGA. We're in contact over infrastructure opportunities, over opportunities in financial inclusion, financing, in the agribusiness area. A variety of investments. And so we know that investors are taking a close interest. And they will take a close interest in these reforms, because without the right policy environment, it is very hard to invest. So they are, of course, observing what's happening and are very encouraged by what they see. They will have to see this then also becoming reality, as we have said before. So there's no way around that. And it's great that investors have gotten the message. Like Keiko said, there are hundreds here. This is very special, and it's a great opportunity. So let's stay close to these investors. We will stay close to them. The Nepalese government will stay close to them and make sure that they then also put their money here. And for that, they will need to see that kind of progress.
We are inviting big investors to invest in our country, but if we see the global scenario, there's a sense of like returning to your own homeland, the current economical climate of protectionism. Will that affect an emerging nation like us? Will it be a problem?
If there's a serious reversal of the open global economy that we have had for the past decades, then that is going to affect everyone. Simply, the developing countries who have made huge progress in poverty reduction, in growth in per capita incomes. Those that have reached middle income status, or look at China, upper middle income status, over the past decades, they have done so with the help of the global economy. Trade has grown faster than GDP, than incomes, which means that on average, businesses have looked more outside than inside. And for that, they have to have that ability to access markets. So if there is a broader move towards protectionism, it's going to hurt everyone, and that includes Nepal.
Is it a broader move or not? What do you assess now?
We all read the news. We know that there are tensions. But at this point, I think we don't have a reason to assume that this is turning into a systematic reversal of globalization. We are not there.
There's an ongoing trade war between US and China that has increased market uncertainty as well. And, you know, the global production is a little depressed. Does this have any effect in Asia, in Nepal?
As Hans-Peter was saying, openness to trade is better than being closed. If you have a larger market, you can grow faster, you can grow bigger, and that means better development. What we have done some analytics about for the South Asia region in general, and there may be diversion of trade flows, and some of the countries may benefit from such diversion of trade flows. But I think this is a country by country, sector by sector specificity. It does not replace the importance of having an open economy, of attracting investors, of making it facilitating inflow of direct foreign investment, of making sure that when investors come, the business environment is conducive for such investment, is open, it facilitates movement of funding, movement of labor, and so on. So I think this is something that is much more important than keeping an eye on some of the clouds on the horizon.
And this two-day summit, Government of Nepal has showcased several projects and programs. Any special attention, like some of the programs you really liked, not as a person from your organization, individually, your favorite program showcased by our government in this summit?
I am actually very impressed. Like all sessions that I attended, people were very honest. People openly talking about challenges, which is really kind of not that easy. You also kind of raising potential issues. Yes, so that's really wonderful. So, but the point I just like to emphasize based on it is always there is a room for improvements if we're just going to take any path. But I think most important thing is let's go forward. So that's like a best way. I like to have people in Nepal to have options, best options in the world, how to access to the power, what kind of jobs to take, what kind of educations to have, and also what kind of healthcare to have. I'm not really saying you have to go for the extreme best quality. Always there is a cost and quality trade-off, but most important thing is people in Nepal has options to pick what you really want. And I definitely think this investment summit will bring a better options and more options to the people in Nepal.
Hans, some of your favorite project showcased by our government, like you've enjoyed watching those projects, like any remark on that?
We have our favorite projects. We ourselves are currently investing together with MIGA in a very large project. So we love our project. But I'm not going to talk about projects. I'm going to talk about the people. This is my first visit to Nepal. And what strikes me is that people are incredibly friendly. And it seems it is a very, very soft and gentle culture. It makes you feel welcome. Really, truly, truly does.
Does that include me as well?
That includes you. You have been very friendly interviewer.
My next question for you would be like, China for the first time, I think, experienced the lowest growth in decades. They are experiencing, like Japan did, declining youth and working population and increasing aging population. How does this will affect South Asia and Nepal? Do you see this thing as a challenge?
Well, China is Nepal's neighbor and is a great opportunity for Nepal. If Nepal can develop its export sector, which is very small today, its export in goods or its tourism exports, then China is going to be an important opportunity. And so to the extent that China slows down, it has some impact. But it's such a big country, it's such a big market that I think within the frame of what Nepal wants to achieve in the next few years, this is not going to make a major difference. And India is stomping ahead right now. It's growing very fast. So Nepal is sitting in an ideal place if one is focused on the opportunities. Nepal is in a great location.
Hart, like both of them are not really interested in talking about the programs showcased by our government. They are like being very diplomatically correct. So your favorite program showcased by the government of Nepal, like if you were the real investor, you would be interested in?
Well, I actually have to join Hans Peter and Keiko in terms of I admire the people of Nepal because look, we had an earthquake here a few years ago, and the resilience of the Nepalese people is impressive. I went to Gaikor, that's I think in Province 1, to see how they are rebuilding their houses and so on. But the other part that I admire is the creativity, and we very often we don't think that Nepal is a place where you have special effects for movies, where you actually are producing computerized animation movies for companies like Disney. And there is one company here that is actually very much involved in that. And what do you need for that? You need the creativity, you need the skills of the young people who are working there. And I think that is the future of Nepal too, to see that we can actually harness some of the new technologies, and that is something where Nepal can be a very competitive player in the global market.
My next question goes to Hans. You know, Nepal's economy is always characterized by high unemployment, around 40%. So high inflation rate, high interest rate, and huge speculative economy. My question to you is, what do you think are some major concerns regarding the development of private sector in Nepal? What is your recommendation to facilitate the transaction and link between small investor and the commercial bank in Nepal?
You're talking about the financing environment. Yes, interest rates are relatively high. Inflation is actually not so high in Nepal. It's come down. It's relatively stable. But the interest rate structure is high. It's expensive to get loans, and therefore you see most of the lending in the commercial sectors. You see most of the lending being of relatively short maturities. And if you think, as you say, about investments, small investments, that can be a big obstacle. So I agree. Nepal has a very stable banking sector. It has a banking sector that has learned to be very judicious in its lending. So non-performing loans are extremely low, which they weren't just a few years ago. So there has been a really important improvement.
It keeps changing.
But what needs to happen is that access to finance for smaller businesses needs to increase. And IFC is very committed to that. By the way, we will, in the near future, step up our lending to financial intermediaries exactly for these purposes. And that needs to happen on a broader scale.
Hart, I'd like to know from you, I mean, given that infrastructure is a major challenge in Nepal owing to its terrain, what do you think are three major important economic variables regarding the Nepalese economy for economic growth to increase domestic employment such that it is feasible and attractive for the Nepali youth to work at home instead of traveling to other countries?
Well, if there's no investment, if the private sector doesn't offer jobs, then Nepalis are forced to work outside. And this is what this investor summit is all about. It's about bringing in the private sector, because who is going to create the jobs for the Nepalis, for the young Nepalis? It's going to be the private sector. That's why investment is absolutely critical, and investment-driven growth is critical. Then access to finance is critical, as Hans-Peter was saying. And lastly, I think it's not the economics alone, it's also the implementation of policies, the capacity of the government to deliver services to the people. And I think this is where one of the projects where we are supporting the government on decentralization is to help them actually make sure that with the federalism system, that at all three tiers there is the capacity to deliver services in education, health, and anything that the population needs. And this is a challenge, but this is where the World Bank has experience and where we are supporting the government.
So you just had a discussion with Prime Minister and Finance Minister yesterday. Like, what did you discuss with them?
Well, we had a very good meeting with the Prime Minister. We congratulated him on his vision and on the first year in office, which is a tremendous achievement. Also attracting more than 500 people from around the globe for this investor summit is an achievement. And what you mentioned earlier, that over the last few months the government has really put through a number of significant, and I cannot stress how significant these reforms are, significant policy reforms that augur very well for attracting investment.
But there are still a lot of criticism from the private sector and the other community as well. They argue that the investment climate has not improved yet. There's room for
the room for the improvements of the investment climate. I hear many different parts of the world, including the European countries, United States, Japan, everywhere people are saying it. And I do see that, of course, everybody has a room for improvements. But we have two options: wait until perfect system and climate comes, or we actually start working on it.
Coping with the problems.
Yes, then yes, it's not a better. And also you have to remember, Nepal is not the only country who wants to have more investment in Vietnam, or even like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, many also African nations are very keen to have investors coming in. So therefore, more than expected private investors showing up in investment summit is quite exceptional. I think it's a good time. You don't really want to miss the bus. So let's get on to the bus together and then make it happen.
Let's do that. I think we've almost come to an end. I would like to wrap up by my last question. Mr. Hart, I would like to know, how do you evaluate World Bank's impact on Nepal for the past 50 years? What do you think are the major bottlenecks for Nepal's growth? Can you just highlight some of the bottlenecks?
Well, let's look at the 50-year relationship. I think it's exactly 50 years this year that the first operation was taken to the board. Since then, the World Bank has supported Nepal to the tune of $5 billion in total. We have currently 25 projects under implementation, $3 billion. Now going forward, I think we are focusing on three things. One is to help build the institutions and the capacity of those institutions to make sure that the federal system is going to work. Second, to work with the government on any policy that will help the private sector to flourish, to grow, to bring in investment. And this is something very specific with regard to doing business. We are working with the government on what are the key bottlenecks here in terms of getting permits, in terms of bringing in the investment and so on. And the third pillar we are working on is resilience to climate. Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries with regard to climate change, and a lot of our program, many of the projects are focusing on helping build resilience.
I think we've come to an end. Thank you for your thoughts, and thank you for sparing time from your busy schedule. It's really wonderful having three of you here in Mysore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
It was a
for having
pleasure.
us.
Same here, delighted.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.